I want to ask a question. You said that Ken knew what your work ethic was like. And, for people who are not in broadcasting, for people who just, turn the radio on or now turn the app on, like I do when they're on the road, turn the app on when I'm like on a run and just listen to you guys, tell me about the game. It seems like a job that you just sort of show up for. You say, you call the game and you go home. But like, what more, like, tell us what more does it take to, to be able to do that?
Well, the most important thing in the game is to follow the ball because you're listening to the game. You want to know what's happening on the field. That said, you have to be prepared for almost any type of circumstance. And even though the game starts at 6:40,
Yep.
typically my day starts with preparation no later than 8 o'clock in the morning. Now it's not all day, but there are books that I keep on a daily basis. There are notes that I keep in another book that I update periodically, and I update the league every day. And then you start reading stories and you jot notes down, and you have stuff ready to use if necessary. Especially now at the pitch clock, who knows if we'll get a chance to get much of this in. But if it's a 2-1 game or a 3-1 game, as Milo used to tell me all the time, these are the games we do for free. But we have a game down, like when young broadcasters send me some of their work, I always tell them, don't send me your highlights. I don't need your greatest hits. And listen to my home run call. Here's my double play call. Here's my play at the plate. I need in the fourth inning where you've lost 7 in a row and you're down 8-1. How are you going to entertain me? How are you going to keep me listening? And that's the challenge that you have. And that's what you have to be prepared for. There's certainly with the analytic model now with so much involved and the opportunity for fans to have access almost to as much information as I do.
Yeah.
But the one thing they don't have is access to the clubhouse. They don't have access to scouts. They don't have access to David Forst or other baseball executives that I've known over the years. I mean, Perry Manassian, who was the GM of the Angels, was a bat boy when I was with the Texas Rangers from 98 to 03. And he comes in the booth and we're like old friends and people are looking around like, how do you get the GM to walk into your booth? Well, that relationship began when, he was just a kid with the Manassian family, which includes Zach, who works for the Giants, Calvin, who works for the Nationals. It's intertwined. And so that helps. I mean, I'm trying to get information, trying to get stories. And especially if you're listening and something happened last night that we don't have the answer to during that game, you're relying on me to ask Tony Kemp what happened on that play, or talk to James Caprillion and say, tell me about that pitch sequence, help you get out Yordan Alvarez. Why did you decide to go the way you did? And that's something that they can't get on their computer at Fangraphs or Baseball Savant or, Baseball Prospectus. Take your pick. There's 1,000 of them out there, all very good and all very helpful to me as well. So that's the one thing I have. I've always had a great relationship with scouts. I think I'm 62 years old. I've been in the game 40 years, including my time in the minor leagues. Oh. And I am still learning every day. And I don't, in no way, shape, or form do I know this game, like, frontwards or backwards. There's stuff that's happening out there that I ask questions about. And I'm thankful that these guys are able to use their eyes and their perspective and help me sound better on the air. Plus, when we've had Shooty on the air, or when we've had Coco Crisp on the air, or when I talk to ex-players that are doing the game, if I've done a couple of games with Dallas on television or whatever. So look, I never stood in the box. I've never been in the clubhouse, during the quiet times. I've never been on the mound. Now I can call the fly ball to center field, and you can help tell me what the pitcher, batter, whatever that situation, what that player might be thinking. What is going through their mind? How are they going to handle that situation? And that's the respect I have. Plus, it's a really hard game. Yeah. I mean, I know fans get mad. How come he couldn't hit that 97 mile an hour fastball? Yeah. Like a snake going to the plate. Why couldn't he hit it to the opposite field? They got the shift on. Why didn't he just hit it the other way? Why didn't he bunt more? Well, it's, like for an example, Tyler Wade, who may or may not make the club. He's a non-roster invitee. Wherever Tyler Wade grew up, which was in Temecula, down in Southern California, At that time, Tyler Wade was the best player in Temecula. Okay, he was the best player, and then that funnel, gets smaller and smaller as you move up through the ranks. So there's a bunch of Tyler Wades that were the best in their place, and then how do you handle that? How do you rise above it? How do you become the player that breaks through and scratches out the kind of career that Tyler's had? Let alone if you're a superstar like Jose Altuve or Alex Bregman, or oncoming superstar like Julio Rodriguez. Take your pick of different players. It's a really hard game, and you have to be respectful of that. You have to be truthful. If you're making mistakes out there, doing some things that don't make sense, you have to be truthful, and they want you to be truthful. Mm-hmm. They don't want you to sugarcoat it, but you don't have to go overboard on certain things and try to do something to appease the fan base, because you have to respect of how hard the game is, and respect that you're in the clubhouse the next day, and you're there to, if somebody has something to say to you, you have to be there to answer.
Well, I've noticed that you pretty much throughout BP, you're just constantly talking to people, players, other broadcasters, visiting people. Like, you're just constantly gathering information, right? Like, that's part of the deal too, right?
That's what we do. I mean, it's just trying to. Sometimes you're going to get nuggets that you go, "Wow, I can't believe that this landed in my lap." It's a great story about this guy, because this happened 5 years ago when he was in a cab or whatever, and now he's at this spot, and it gives you an opportunity to tell that story and present that to the fans. Again, the access that we have is important, but we're all exchanging information. The broadcasters are a very close fraternity. We're a very helpful fraternity among ourselves, because we know how hard the job is. And, we want to present the product as best we can. And that is part of it. But before the game, there'll be scouts that'll come into the booth, and I'll fire questions at them all the time about players or situations or something. I'll go to the umpire's room. My first year, 2006 with Ken. So I said, I'll be back in a little bit. I'm going to go down to the umpire's room. And we all know Bill King's relationship with umpires.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ken looks at me and goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I'm going to ask Bill Miller about what happened on that play last night. I need a further explanation on why it was called the way it was. Yeah. Was there running or whatever?" He goes, "Well, we don't do that here." I go, "Well, I've been doing it for years. I mean, if you have a question, don't you want to ask that person the question?" So going down to the umpire's room is just part of the process. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens some. And the umpires are thankful. They're appreciative that you're down there, that you want to know what's happening. You want to ask them, because they've got a hard job as well too, especially with every camera angle known to man, and super slow motion, and guys' fingernails off the base. They got to call them out, and ridiculous stuff like that. But it just strengthens. I think it strengthens the broadcast, and just makes it better, because I can go down and do that. I mean, there are people that are in the game that were with, like, my first team in 1984, my first full-time team with the Lynchburg Mets, that are still in the game. Mike Coverage was my manager. He was a longtime scout for the Nationals and some other teams I had seen around the league. Dan Plesac was on MLB Network. We were together in 1985 when I was in El Paso. He's one of our pitchers. We're still good friends to this day. And then, like I mentioned, Perry Manassi and Scott Service, who's the manager of the Mariners. So we were together first at the Olympics in '88. Got drafted by the Astros. I had him in Tucson. I was in the big leagues when he got called up at the All-Star break of 1991. Our wives are best friends. Scott and Jill are godparents to one of my kids. So that relationship is one that I lean on as well. So I'm just very thankful. There are a lot of people in the game that I've seen, and thankful to call friends, and thankful that they're willing to help give us some information.